Hi everybody. So today I wanted to do a video on the question, who has kept peace within the borders of the European Union? Has it been the European Union or has it been NATO? So I'm going to wade into this argument because I don't think it's as simple as people make out. Now, let's have a look at the two organisations. NATO obviously is a military alliance. Whereas the European Union is something far deeper, where peoples from all countries interlink, they work, love, marry, build businesses, etc. And countries within the European Union cooperate on all different levels, and to a certain extent they share some sovereignty in order to make it work. Now, with regards to sovereignty, this is limited sovereignty. And we share sovereignty in all different ways. We share sovereignty with NATO to a certain extent, and certainly with the WTO. But anyway, let's not get drawn into that argument. Now, so comparing the two, so I was trying to think of a good analogy for this, and the best I could come up with is this, that comparing the two is like comparing Robert the Bruce's alliance with Edward I, and then comparing that with the Act of Union between England and Scotland. So the first lasted 12 years. The latter, to the Act of Union, has lasted over 300 years. We'll see how much longer it lasts with current events, but you can see from that just how much more stable the Act of Union has been. NATO was founded to provide protection from the Soviet Union. The European coal and steel community, which evolved into the European Union, was founded to prevent European nations going to war against each other ever again. And it succeeded. It's provided the longest period of peace within the borders of the European Union since the fall of the Western Roman Empire, which is almost 2,000 years. The success of the European Union, in my view, has strengthened the unity within NATO. So the prosperity the EU has created has meant that the United States has remained focused on the alliance because the EU is such a huge market for them. But in addition to that, of course, we also share the Western liberal political attitudes that are fostered by the European Union. So we share them with the United States, at least up until recently. Obviously, these attitudes seem to be shifting. So military alliances, and this is the key point, military alliances, they fracture eventually. They always do. However, the European Union is designed to be permanent. The ability for its people, industries and business to intertwine, where people can live anywhere, love anywhere, marry, work, raise children anywhere. This is by design to ensure that people within the European Union never take up arms and go to war against each other ever again. And it was designed and implemented by the very people who saw European nations tear themselves apart. The people who created the European coal and steel community, that wrote the Treaty of Rome, the Maastricht Treaty, that worked towards the Lisbon Treaty, that made the European coal and steel community turn into the EEC, that eventually then turned into the European Union, were people from the very generations who fought in the mud of Passchendaele, or who witnessed the storming of the beaches of Normandy. They were the war generations. Now, in my view, these are the two greatest generations in our history. The World War I generation, sadly, is no longer with us. The World War II generation, again, sadly, is dwindling. But there is data that shows what those generations thought about the EEC and the European Union. There's a London School of Economics blog by Professor Ben Clements, and I will add a link to this in the description of the video. This blog shows that in the 1975 referendum, this was a referendum about whether we wanted to remain in the EEC or whether we wanted to leave, almost 80% of those from the war generations, 80% of those from the war generations voted to remain in the EEC. That's a huge amount, 80%. Now, conversely, the group that was most likely to vote, least likely to vote remain in 1975 were the youngest grouping, which are the people who are today now 60 years plus, i.e. the people that were most likely to vote to leave the European Union in the 2016 referendum. So there's some evidence that people that were young in 1975 carried that forward into 2016, and they voted to leave the European Union, just as they voted to leave the EEC in 1975. So my point is that the European Union and its predecessors were designed by those who witnessed war in order that future generations wouldn't have to experience what they went through. And it's worked. As I said before, it's the longest period of peace within the borders of the European Union in almost 2,000 years. So would peace have been maintained without the European Union? The truth is nobody knows. No one knows how during the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s and all the turmoil within those decades, whether countries would have left NATO. It's almost certain that the countries in the European Union wouldn't be as rich as they are now. And as such, the question has to be asked, would America have detached itself from Europe and focused more on the Pacific nations? The truth is, anyone that says that they're sure about this isn't. They simply don't know what they're talking about, because it's all conjecture. So no one knows. But I think it's safe to say that peace in Europe has been kept because of this. It's been kept because of the European Union. It's been kept because of NATO. And it's been kept because of nuclear weapons. The three of those things existing together. However, I believe history shows us that the future of NATO is that it will eventually break up. But the permanent foundations built into the European Union, which is its very purpose, which was to keep peace in its borders, will last for centuries to come. And so that's what's held as the greatest achievement in cooperation and peace in human history. So to sum up, NATO, the European Union and nuclear weapons have both contributed to keeping peace within the borders of the European Union. However, NATO will eventually fracture. Military alliances always do. But the permanency that's built into the foundations of the European Union means it will be carried forward into the future for centuries to come, hopefully, and that will keep peace on our continent. Think of it this way. We simply cannot imagine that England going to war with Scotland. Whereas prior to the Act of Union, we were constantly at war. Now, the same thing, hopefully, is being achieved via the European Union. It's being achieved for the nations that were constantly at war in Europe, Britain included, for centuries and centuries after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Now, if the European Union is able to continue that peace, which I believe it will be, because that's its purpose, that's its main purpose, then it deservedly is called the greatest achievement in cooperation and peace in human history. So if you like these videos, please subscribe, please share them. You can find me on Twitter. I spam a lot of stuff with regards to Brexit and the European Union. You can find me on Facebook. Yeah, so anyway, take care guys.